Hello, I'm David R. Jones of the Community Service Society. A new report by CSS reveals that New York City's unemployed are disproportionately young, less educated, and people of color. Unemployment, next on the urban agenda. Joining me now is Jonathan Rosen, director of the New York City Unemployment Project, Leslie Eaton, who reports on the economy and employment in the New York Times, and my CSS colleague, senior policy analyst Dr. Mark Levitan. Welcome to you all on the Urban Agenda.
Nice.
Mark, let's talk about what's happening in the city. It's been a little cold outside, I think, as most of our viewers know. What's it been like for people trying to stay in the job market?
It's been very rough. We've had now 2 years of employment declines in New York City. From December 2000 to December 2002, the city shed 175,000 jobs. What's very troubling is what happened at the end of last year. It looked like the city economy was beginning to stabilize in the spring and the summer, but from August to December of 2002, New York lost 42,000 jobs. The unemployment rate went to 8.4%. There are 300,000 New Yorkers without a job, actively seeking work.
Leslie, as you look at it from the vantage point of a reporter, how is this playing out as you make reports? Who's being hurt by this recession? I think there's some impression that it's only white-collar Wall Street types.
No, it's certainly not, although it is it's new. It's a change that there are so many college-educated and experienced people who cannot find jobs, especially in certain areas like technology and what they call business services, which is everything from temporary office workers to very technical people. Unemployment does disproportionately fall on the young, unfortunately, and the disadvantage. That's not new. I think what is new is that more people who thought they would never be unemployed are unemployed.
Now, you get a chance to actually talk to people who are up against this. What kind of stories are they telling?
Get a chance is not maybe the way I put it. You know,
this is not happy.
I'm hanging out with the unemployed, and it's sad and hard. I talk to people who send out hundreds and hundreds of resumes a week and have been unemployed for months and can't find work, can't even find temporary work, some of them. It's discouraging, it's dispiriting, and some of them are talking about leaving the city.
Now, everyone keeps saying that for the rest of the nation this recession is over or just a temporary blip. What is your feeling, Mark, in this New York case? How long is this going to take us to get at it?
Well, it's going to take us a while. In terms of the national economy, the gross domestic product output has been growing, employment hasn't been growing. When we look at the city, output is shrinking and employment is shrinking. We have a jobless recovery nationally. We have a prolonged recession and a prolonged slump in the labor market locally. I think that we're many months away from recovery nationally and many, many months away from recovery in New York City. The mayor's OMB put out a forecast that the mayor based his budget on this week, and they're not talking about any job growth until the very end of 2003.
Jonathan, as your organization deals with the question of the unemployed, what kind of situations are you trying to address as you go forward?
I mean, it's across the board. Many people, like Leslie said, are sort of the newly unemployed, people who have college degrees, who had worked in IT and business services. The issues they face are definitely dispiriting. 401k plans being eliminated, student loan funds accumulating, mortgage problems, bankruptcy. But what's even more of a crisis across the city is people who were just starting to get a toehold in the economy in the late 1990s, people leaving welfare for work, people who've been working really, really hard, and now they're losing their homes, they're going back on welfare, on food stamps, and on a safety net that's just totally frayed from what it was years ago.
In terms of what this is going to mean long term, are many of these people ever going to get back into the workforce? Leslie, are you getting the sense that we're seeing something permanent and chronic? We've always had an unemployment rate that is well above that of the rest of the nation. Now, clearly, we're seeing numbers of double digits for certain classes, particularly of African American and Latino workers. What about this? Is this a permanent structural thing we're looking at?
Boy, I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not too.
I think it's hard to say. It's going to depend a lot on the kinds of jobs that are produced when the recovery begins again. And I agree with Mark, that's going to be a long time. We have city layoffs likely, or possible anyway. Wall Street is continuing to lay people off. Airports, which are very important to our economy, you know, airlines are laying people off, the airports are not coming back. Those often provide good entry-level jobs. We'll have to see what kind of jobs become available when things get better to know if this is permanent.
There's been some discussion that one of the problems New York is having is that while its economy for a long time was just producing extraordinary results, that it may be too limited. In other words, not a diversified economy. Mark, what do you think? Are we sort of a banana republic in our own way?
Well, we're a one-crop economy, and when the price of bananas is high, the city economy does well, and some of that wealth actually does trickle down a little bit to the poor.
And this is the financial sector, basically.
This is Wall Street.
Right.
The problem is that Wall Street, by its very nature, is a volatile industry. There are wild swings in the stock market, Wall Street profits, and that means that the rest of us are the tail on this kite. And it also has, of course, incredible implications for the city budget. The city budget is really tied to Wall Street. So every time we have a recession, we have a budget crisis, which further damages the economy because then we have to lay off public sector workers and cut back on public spending.
What about the demographics of who the unemployed are becoming? I mean, are there really clusters of which part of the workforce is being most harmed by this recession? Have we gotten any sense of that? I'll ask you first, Mark.
Well, we do. We know that, for example, about 48% of the city's labor force are black or Hispanic, but 60% of the unemployed are black and Hispanic. We know that young people, say between workers under 25 years of age, are about 13% of the labor force, but they're 30% of the unemployed. Less educated workers are overrepresented amongst the unemployed. I know that there's been a lot of conversation about this being a white-collar recession. And if you look over time, you'll see that people who are executives, managers, professional workers, technical workers are an increasing share of the unemployed. They are because they're an increasing share of the economy. So those workers are about 35% of the city labor force, but they're still only 20% of the city unemployed. Blue-collar workers, by contrast, are now only 20% of the city labor force, but they're 30% of the city's unemployed. So although we've had this extraordinary event, this tragedy of the World Trade Center, which has no precedent when we talk about who's unemployed, we've rounded up the usual suspects.
Let's talk about the kind of businesses that are really laying off. I think you touched on it earlier. Where do you see the unemployed coming from? What kind of background are many, what kind of work history did many of the people have as you do the reportage for the Times?
I see there are a lot of different kinds of industries that have been affected. Right. Certainly we talked about the airports, yeah, and all of the little businesses that provide services to airlines or to the airports. They employ a lot of people. Queens has been very, very hard hit. A lot of those people live and work in Queens, and the unemployment rate is very high there. There are also, the garment industry, as usual, is having a terrible time, and those are all blue-collar workers as well. But there are a lot of women, a lot of older women, a lot of older people in general. If you become unemployed at the age of 52, you are in big trouble, and these people are frightened that they will never work again.
And the pattern, obviously, if you're a low-wage worker, you don't get much notice when the layoff comes. I mean, everyone sort of has, the pink slip comes, you have time to reorder yourself and begin the job search. Is that what's happening to, I'll start with you, Jonathan.
No, I mean, absolutely not.
Companies
are going out of business. People are getting laid off immediately. We have many members whose companies went out of business and their last paychecks bounced. No savings, no assets. No safety net.
I remember we at CSS did a lot of work, obviously, in the direct aftermath of the World Trade Center attack. And I still remember interviewing and sitting down with a 73-year-old messenger, not a bicycle. I asked him, you had a bicycle? Oh no, I was a subway messenger who went out on a call, came back, the entire business had ceased to exist, and they took 2 weeks of his wages. He had nothing. He was destitute instantly at that moment. And I get the impression that that's an extreme, but the issue of a low-wage worker on sort of on a very marginal basis is it gets instantly desperate.
With no savings.
With no savings,
And with
of
an
course
unemployment insurance system that often takes weeks and weeks to kick in for low-wage workers who have the most difficult time accessing that system.
And many of them don't qualify anyway, which
Absolutely.
leaves them really with nothing. There's no safety net for those people.
We'll be right back to continue the urban agenda.
Oh, you're lucky, young fella. You know, hospitals didn't even use ether for your procedure until about 1846. Yeah, slap on a few live leeches, grab a hacksaw, get to work. Of course, we don't use leeches anymore.
It's fun to know history. Find curious facts from America's past at loc.gov, the Library of Congress website.
We're discussing unemployment in New York City with Jonathan Rosen of the New York Unemployment Project, Leslie Eaton from the New York Times, and CSS Senior Policy Analyst Dr. Mark Levitan. Well, I think all of us know this shouldn't be a problem at all. We have unemployment insurance. I mean, you know, we worked hard. Roosevelt worked hard to bring this all about, so there is no problem, right, Jonathan?
I think
unemployment insurance will handle this whole problem.
Absolutely. I think most New Yorkers would be surprised to find out that over half of all people who lose their jobs never get a dime in unemployment insurance. Many people, when they lose their job, are shocked to find out they're part of that half that isn't going to get unemployment
Well, why not?
insurance.
I mean, this is almost, that's un-American not to get. What's happened?
There's a couple big reasons,
Right.
and there's a few smaller ones. Among the biggest one is the change in the labor force. Temp workers, contingent work, independent contractors permeate the New York City economy. You know, cab drivers who were impacted heavily after 9/11, livery cab drivers, high-tech temp workers. Most of them don't qualify for UI because they have no work history. On the flip side, there's plenty of people who would qualify if they could access or apply for unemployment benefits. You have to apply over the phone. You have to apply over the phone in English or Spanish. If you're one of the tens of thousands of New Yorkers who speaks Chinese, French, Polish, Russian, you're shut out of the system completely.
And how much knowledge is there? For instance, if I'm a low-wage worker, I mean, does everyone really know they have a right to this stuff?
No, absolutely not. And employers, especially low-wage, unscrupulous employers, have a big incentive not to let their employees
What's
know
the
what their
incentive?
rights.
Why should they care? This is a federal program.
Well, unemployment's paid for by payroll taxes by employers. Okay. Employers are experience rated, meaning when they have a big layoff, they pay a bit more. If I run a seasonal company that every summer lays off 30 people, I'm probably going to have to pay a bit more than your company that is stable all the time and doesn't tap the system very much. So employers have an incentive to make sure their workers don't get benefits, and they fight tooth and nail to challenge when their people do get.
Is this also true for employers who forget to pay their unemployment insurance? They don't want to bring attention to it by having claims filed?
Absolutely. Many employers have informal sector workers. You go into the outer boroughs, into factories. You go to the Upper West Side where people employ nannies and domestic staff. People are all entitled to UI. People aren't paying payroll taxes on these people. They're not filing them as.
Now, what happens to the newly unemployed who are legal immigrants? Are they entitled to unemployment insurance?
If you're if you're here with the right to work legally,
right,
you're entitled to unemployment insurance. If you're undocumented, which is a huge part of our economy, you're not.
You're out of luck.
I mean, it's a very, when you look at a question of fundamental fairness, these people pay payroll taxes. Most undocumented workers, and A, we depend on them to make our economy go. B, we take money out of their paycheck for payroll taxes. And when it comes time, we cut them off from benefits, which also costs the city more. I mean, in the end, they end up as a social services problem for the city.
And what else are you entitled to as you come off unemployment? Do you know, Leslie, in terms of, what about health benefits? What does someone do who suddenly loses their job? Say I'm a single mother with kids, and suddenly, I have an asthmatic kid, I lose my job. What happens then? Do I still have a right to anything?
You can apply.
You can apply.
The welfare system in our city is predicated on the idea that everybody can go and find a job. And so welfare to work worked because there were jobs for people. It's now taking people much longer to find work, much, much, much longer. You often get rejected if you apply for benefits. I mean, I've heard lots of stories from people who get rejected 3, 4, 5 times when they're trying to get benefits. Often it helps to have an advocate to help you through the system because it's very complicated.
And the public assistance system here is Kafkaesque, and we have people who apply for food stamps every day in our organization who are completely entitled, but they fall into the very large number of people.
Well, what happens? I mean, why should they have to come to you? This is a government responsibility. What is the story? Give us an example of what a person goes through.
We had a member who lived in the North Bronx who had worked actually for the Red Cross doing disaster relief. Had been laid off. They laid off a huge number of call center agents. Went to apply for stamps at the North Bronx Center. Woman said, you know, you're not eligible yet, come back, come back, come back. 15 weeks went by. We finally found a bunch of other people who were in the same situation and went up to that site and worked on it. And that's not uncommon. I mean, the City Council General Welfare Committee and the Public Advocate have just released reports about the fact that there are 800,000 New Yorkers who are financially eligible for food stamps and are being denied. And that's a legacy of the Giuliani, Jason Turner, war on the poor. This was a welfare system that, completely prioritized getting people out the door and off the rolls.
And this clearly isn't a matter of money. I mean, this is a federal program.
It's a federal program
available to everybody.
But it's also proving sort of the big lie of welfare reform. In the 90s when the economy was booming in New York, it was somewhat easier to mask the deficiencies of the new welfare system. Now people are lining up at the door for food stamps and Medicaid and being cut off.
Right. Well, Mark, I mean, okay, you get on your unemployment insurance. How much money do you get? Do you get enough to live on?
No, especially if you're a low-wage worker. The replacement rate, that is, what proportion of your prior wage is being replaced by unemployment insurance, is about 50%, capped up to $405 a week. So if you're a low-wage worker, this is not a check that you can live on. I mean, this is something that may help you purchase a couple of groceries and keep your landlord at bay while you're scrambling to find something. But as a long-run proposition, this is a ticket to bankruptcy.
And it's not long-term. How many weeks do you get this stuff?
Under state law, you're entitled to 26 weeks of unemployment insurance benefits. The federal government in March of 2002 created a 13-week extension program, which it was just renewed by Congress and will exist until May 31st. And
is there any indication that we're getting that there's going to be yet another renewal? I don't know, Leslie, I don't know what you're hearing.
I don't think so, but I'm not an expert. I do think that people are running out of benefits after 9 months, basically, and it's taking much longer than that to find a job. So.
And we're going to keep making the case for extended benefits. There are 84,000 people in New York right now who've exhausted all of those benefits and are completely without jobs. And we anticipate about 5,000 more people a month, upping to 10,000 towards the end of the year, are going to be in that same boat.
I find that about 22% of the city's unemployed have been unemployed for 40 weeks or more. Mm-hmm. So these are people who, even if they originally qualified for benefits, wouldn't be getting them now.
That's tens of thousands of people.
One of the program things we always want to leave people with how we're going to fix this problem. And how do you go about wrestling with this? We've got a serious recession. It's obviously hitting New Yorkers very profoundly. What are the solutions here? How are we going to get New York back to work? Is it just the business cycle that's going to buoy us out of this, or what's going to happen? What are the recommendations floating around, if you know any, Mark?
Well, the first thing we can do is try to fix the unemployment insurance system, and Jonathan just mentioned something that would be very important, which is an additional 13 weeks of benefits. Not only does it alleviate suffering, but it's good economics. The last extension paid out some $10 billion across the country to people who are going to take that money. They're not going to stuff it under their mattress. They're going to spend it. And that's what we need, more spending in a recession. So another extension not only is good for the people in need, but it would also stimulate the economy. So I would begin with that. But then there's more that we need to do. And really, this is a federal responsibility. We need a strong economic stimulus package. We need it right away.
Leslie, do you have any sense of how the welfare system interacts with this whole thing? Would a change in the city's welfare policy, for instance, that makes it somewhat more supportive, have any beneficial impact on this whole problem? What is your view of how that works?
Well, as I think Mark has shown, people did benefit, single mothers did benefit from the welfare to work, some of the welfare to work programs. in the 90s. I think the question is, how do you retool that for a different kind of economy where jobs are not easily available? And I think that's something that the city is going to have to wrestle with. There's also the fact that neither the city nor the state has any money at the moment. The unemployment insurance fund is running in the red to the tune of $400 million at this point. There is no money for additional benefits right now.
This makes it particularly surprising. Just recently, the city went on record when a bill was about to pass in Albany on welfare, which would allow people on welfare, instead of working off their grant, to get further education. That suddenly they came up and actually convinced the governor to veto a bill that the Republicans in the state Senate were supportive of. What's going on with the city from your vantage point? Why are they still acting like this is a boom economy?
What's going on is the legacy of this completely ideological work-first priority that's denying the reality that there are no jobs out there. You know, the fact that the governor vetoed the basic education bill, which would have said, instead of going into meaningless make-work activity, you can go get your GED, take some English language courses. It just shows that the city is not in tune with the experience of real unemployed people right now.
And based on your study, obviously there is a big impact if you have some on education.
The more education you have, the higher probability you have of having a job, and of course you have a much higher wage. I mean, we want people to be working, but we also want them not to be poor if they're working.
This comes down to, in a recession, who pays? During the boom, and big employers and big corporations got big payroll tax cuts that drained the unemployment insurance fund and created a crisis where right now we can't fund more education, where we have a governor proposing cutting aid to students going to CUNY and SUNY, upping tuition, cutting back on welfare programs to the city, slashing Medicaid and making our members have a much more difficult time getting health insurance, and putting downward pressure on low-wage people, upping the subway fare that whether you're unemployed or not, you got to keep paying it. Pushing property taxes up, a bill that keeps coming if you're a homeowner, whether or not you have a job or you don't. At the same time, he's asking nothing from employers who benefited so much during the boom. We could extend benefits until this recession was over if we could just get the payroll tax system back in line.
Well, you hear it obviously, Leslie. I mean, the argument the governor and others who have been talking about that taxation now will drive businesses out of the city of New York and will be I think the phrase is job killing.
Job killing, yeah.
What are you seeing in terms of, the different viewpoints that are out there?
The business community feels very, very strongly that they cannot afford right now to pay more taxes. They will pay some more in unemployment insurance taxes. That's automatic. Right. Unfortunately, New York right now, this has been a hard place to be. Companies that were in Lower Manhattan, those that have stayed are having, it's very difficult. There are loads of reasons to leave. And unfortunately, overall taxes on business, they think, are still very high.
But I would disagree, though. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. I mean, the amount of, in New Jersey, in Connecticut, taxes are going up to close budget gaps. Republican governors across the country are upping corporate tax, closing corporate tax loopholes, upping upper income tax brackets. If you're dependent on the region, they're not going to go anywhere. Part of the big lie of this sort of job-killing tax cuts mantra that the governor said, there's very little link between taxes and corporate decisions of where they're going to cite jobs.
Well, this raises the other question. There are other ways to skin this cat, obviously. I know, Mark, and you.
I mean, you don't want to increase taxes during a recession.
Right.
But cutting spending is just as bad and perhaps even worse. There are 3 industries in the city that have continued to grow and actually have helped low-wage, unskilled women. Healthcare, social services, and education. Well, guess what's on the governor's chopping block? Healthcare, major industry, major employer of low-wage women. That industry is going to shrink because of the budget cuts. The budget is a political document, but it's an economic instrument as well. And cutting spending is as harmful or more harmful in the long run than raising taxes on those who can afford them.
And the governor and the mayor are talking about spreading the pain. If they're going to get serious about that, it's time to actually ask corporations and upper-income New Yorkers to pay rather than low-wage workers and the unemployed across the board.
Well, what does the New York Times think? What is a reporter on the New York Times?
We observe, we don't think. That's what our critics will tell you too, unfortunately. you know, there are also arguments that you're killing the goose that lays the golden egg, that much of the government is funded by taxes on high-wage workers already, and that if you encourage them to leave, to move, even to move to a place where the rates are going up, that that will hurt the city in the long run.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to get to find out one way or the other. My thanks to Jonathan Rosen, Leslie Eaton, and Mark Levitan. Many New Yorkers have faced hard times since the devastating events of September 11th. This is especially so in poor communities where unemployment has hit hardest. So much could and should be done to reduce the record level of unemployment in New York City. I'm David R. Jones of the Community Service Society. Thank you for watching the Urban Agenda.
To comment on the Urban Agenda or for more information on CSS, contact Community Service Society of New York, 105 East 22nd Street, New York, New York, 10010. Area code 212-254-8900.